Now it's time we get into research theory. Theories provide an understanding of how people interact, how systems work, and why conflicts escalate or de-escalate. As researchers, you need to know some of the concepts and keywords related to theories used to drive research. In most of the research courses, the instructors have students memorize the definitions of large and difficult to pronounce words such as ethnography, which means a description of culture or people, phenomenology, which means gathering data about a person's perspective, belief, and emotions. Here, I want to keep it as simple as possible. The main reason I am going through theory is because it is not covered in any of the assigned readings, and it is one of the course learning outcomes, which is define theory and why it is important for a reflective practitioner. I will stick mostly with the theories related to research methods so I don't overlap with what you have or will learn in your NCRP 504 Theories of Conflict course. Every research text seems to have its own definition of theory. Some mathematical and scientific theories require very complex validation, such as theories of gravity, relativity, or mechanics. They require mathematical proofs. Some social science theories are based on observations or logical syllogisms. As I said before, you have a whole course of theories of conflict. Some of these theories can be tested through research while others can't. For example, in attribution theory, it says that people's behavior in conflict is dependent on their perceptions of the other party. What type of research would support this? Another example is the often cited theory conflict is inevitable. How could this be grounded in research through interviews, observations, experiments, or surveys? Game theory mathematicians theorize that people operate in their self interest to avoid the worst possible outcome. As conflict resolution practitioners, we must explore how to connect research with theory. I've taught the scientific process to my third grade students, and there's a whole bunch of different models out there and cool graphics. The scientific process itself is a theory of the optimal way to deductively gather data to support a theory or inductively collect data to make theoretical generalizations. Walter Wallace created a circle diagram to show the connections between theory, hypothesis, observation, and empirical generalization, which I present on this slide. In deductive research, a student will write a question to support a theory or hypothesis and then try to confirm it through observation. During inductive research, the researcher begins with an observation and looks for a pattern to fit into an existing theory or create a new theory. According to Trocham, there are two research fallacies associated with deductive and inductive research. The ecological fallacy occurs when you make conclusions about the individuals based on analysis of a group of data. An exception fallacy is a sort of the reverse of the ecological fallacy. It occurs when you reach a group conclusion on the basis of an exceptional case. Here we go with independent and dependent variables. And this is put in a visual chart. On the first chart, you have on the x-axis, which is horizontal, the ending time, which is the independent variable, and then you have the dependent variable on the vertical y-axis, which in this case is price. If you apply the same concept to the next graph, which is spousal support and work family conflict, you have spousal support as the independent variable on the x-axis, and you have the work family conflict, which is the dependent variable on the y-axis. And as you can see, the greater the spousal support, the less the work family conflict. So you can see a trend there. And the third one just seemed to be shows that the dependent variable is caused by the independent variable, and you could have a mediator in the middle. But this is from a mathematical article that has nothing to do with the mediator as a third party in a conflict. Qualitative versus quantitative connection between research and theory. Research methods theory seems to follow a limited number of forms. One form in quantitative research is the interconnected hypothesis. An example is the higher stress a person has, the greater chance the person will have an argument, or the more guns there are, the greater number of accidental shootings there will be. If then logical statements show an inference, like if the parties don't settle in a mediation, then they will go to court. Visual models show a causal model to show the connection of research to theory. In qualitative research, data is collected, then connected to research, or theory provides a skeleton to organize data. Sometimes I've read qualitative research reports that don't use theory at all.
Thomas Kuhn theorized that theory itself goes through paradigm shifts. If this holds true, theories will go through a continuously evolving transformation from one paradigm to a more sophisticated paradigm. Now that I have gone over a broad overview of theory from a variety of sources, I will focus on the discussion that Cresswell has on theory in his textbook. Cresswell defines theory as the interrelated set of constructs formed into propositions that specify the relationships among variables. And theory also describes how and why variables are related. Cresswell describes different forms of theories. The forms include a set of hypotheses, a series of if-then statements, or a visual model.
Some research books, like John Cresswell's Research Design, gives a script of sample language to describe how you connect the theory to the research. In this example, it lists the name of the theory, the origin or author of the theory, the topics of the theory that are being applied, and how the theory is related to the research. This is specific language to describe how theory fits into a research article.
Cresswell describes the deductive approach used in quantitative research as the researcher tests or verifies the theory. The researcher tests hypotheses or research questions from the theory. Then the researcher defines and operationalizes variables derived from the theory. And lastly, the researcher measures or observes variables using an instrument to obtain scores. Creswell places theory in a quantitative study within an arrangement of placement advantages and disadvantages. The advantagement of placing the theory in the introduction is that it's the common approach, it's familiar to readers, and it conveys a deductive approach. The disadvantages of placing the theory in a quantitative study in the introduction is it is difficult for readers to isolate the theory base from other components of the research process. According to Creswell, the advantages of placing the theory in the literature review is that including theories in the literature review is a logical extension or part of the literature, whereas the disadvantages are it's difficult for a reader to see the theory in isolation from the larger literature. The advantages of putting the theory after the hypothesis or research question is that the theory discussion explains how and why variables are related. The disadvantages are it may leave out an extended discussion about the origin and use of the theory. The last method Creswell describes about placing the theory would be in a separate section. The advantages of placing theory in a separate section is it clearly separates the theory from other components of the research process, and it enables the reader to better identify and understand the theoretical base. The disadvantages of placing the theory in a separate section is the theory discussion is isolated and may not easily connect with other components of the research process. Theory use in qualitative research. Theory may be used as a broad explanation or as a theoretical lens or perspective. In the endpoint, a theory is generated. The researcher may also choose not to employ theory in a qualitative study. In contrast to the deductive approach used in quantitative research, which was a top-down approach, and the chart a few slides ago showed the arrows going down, the inductive logic of research used in a qualitative study, the arrows and the chart moves upward, where the researcher gathers information, the researcher asks open-ended questions of participants or records, fields notes. The researcher analyzes data to form themes or categories. The researcher looks for broad patterns, generalizations, or theories from themes or categories. And then the researcher poses generalizations or theories and compares to past experiences and literature. The use of theory in mixed methods is where the researcher may include theory deductively to do some theory testing. They may include theory inductively and find emerging patterns, or they may use a theoretical lens or perspective to guide the study. This concludes the lecture on research theory.